And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
Business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Dom Gocher.
How well did that go down?
We can talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at preneurmedia.tv.
Hi, and welcome to this week's PreneurCast. Usually, PreneurCast is with me, Dom Goucher, and him, Pete Williams. But this week, Pete and I have both been really busy. So Pete took the time to interview Peter Shallard. Peter's also known as the Shrink for Entrepreneurs, and his main business is in helping entrepreneurs with the more psychological aspects of being in business and succeeding. Now, this week, Pete's talking to Peter about these topics, specifically and relevant to PreneurCast, Preneur Community, and the things that we talk about on this show. Pete talks to Peter about pricing and the psychology behind pricing, which is something that we've talked about quite a lot on the show as part of the 7 levers. He also brings up topics like coaching and just taking action. So sit back and listen to Pete and Peter.
Hey Peter, how are you today, mate?
I'm good.
Down in Atlantic City, living the good life.
Yeah, that's right. Slipped away to the beach for a couple of days, but I'm doing work, crushing tasks, keeping it real.
Very cool, man. Very, very cool. So the Shrink for Entrepreneurs, which I love that phrase. So before we get into the whole conversation about pricing, which I'm really excited to have with you, Shrink for Entrepreneurs, do you want to talk about the brand a little bit for a couple of seconds?
So I started out, my first business was a psychotherapy practice. That's where my background is. And the Shrink for Entrepreneurs was kind of like the ultimate brand evolution from that. I actually started accidentally working with people who ran businesses, had a brief foray into corporate consulting, and then actually sorted my own shit out and learned how to market and do all of that. Kind of mastered my own business and built the Shrink for Entrepreneurs brand, started blogging as my primary customer acquisition strategy, and have sort of never looked back. So it's great. I get to work with business owners all around the world who are all kicking ass at various different levels, and just help them out with where psychology and their business's bottom line intersect. That's where we focus.
Which is really, really cool, because I think just that niche of being the shrink and working on entrepreneurs' mindsets is just such a great little niche to be in, which obviously is a positioning thing that we talk about quite a bit on the show here. But I guess the thing I'd love to talk to you about is the mindset behind pricing, because as I said in the intro for the show today, as part of the 7 levers that we talk about quite a bit, pricing's a big sticking point for a lot of people in terms of raising their prices as a way to increase profits. So many people are reluctant to do that and resistant to do that, and end up just having that race to the bottom of the cheapest is better, and that just affects everything you do in your business. If you don't have decent revenues or decent profit margins, you can't invest in quality products and quality customer service and retention strategies and all other sort of stuff we talk about. So from your perspective, why do you think prices is such a big deal for entrepreneurs and business owners?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. It's for all of the reasons that you just mentioned. And what I observe with my work is the other side of the other sort of piece of the puzzle, which is that, and it's the reason that pricing is a topic that makes most business owners so uncomfortable as well. Like it bothers people to discuss. It's like the stuff that small business owners kind of nightmares are made of. The idea of like sitting down with a bunch of your peers or your competitors even and talking about like, well, what do you charge? Yeah. And it's because pricing I think has the most direct psychological correlation with your sense of self-worth as an entrepreneur. And the smaller the business is, the more that connection and that correlation is there. So it's for those people who define themselves as solopreneurs or who are maybe just work with the occasional freelancer. They have this massive psychological connection with their price, because it's kind of like kind of like putting a price on what you are worth or your kind of creative output is worth. So it really taps into all of these parts of our mind that can create all kinds of emotional responses. Fear and anxiety. There's a whole bunch of ways that different entrepreneurs can react to pricing, and it's a source of a lot of anxiety for a lot of people.
I also think too that a lot of people have that belief and opinion that everyone wants to, to only spend the minimal amount of money. And I think from people I speak to, and you have probably a lot more science behind this, and even if I'm actually completely right or wrong, is that when you're starting out, you do have limited resources yourself. So you start thinking that everyone in the world has the same limited resources as you, and who can't necessarily afford the best, which is obviously what most people try and produce and sell. So they sort of think, well, everyone's like me. And I think that happens not just pricing, actually, and in a lot of things in business or in life, that sort of people sort of start to think that everyone is like them. And when you sort of get into a particular interest or hobby or niche, that it seems to sort of encompass you in your life, and that then you think that everyone isn't into this sort of thing. When I started racing Ironman triathlons, I started thinking that everyone I knew and everyone I saw was somehow involved in triathlon, which is completely not the case. It's still a very small sport. But if that's sort of what your mindset is, you start to think that everyone's got the same mindset. Is that a fair kind of assessment as well?
Yeah, the psychological description for that is kind of this catchphrase that explains it really elegantly, I think, that and it's just perception is projection. And what that means is that we have a tendency, a kind of a cognitive bias. We have this habit of projecting onto the world around us the stuff that's going on within us.
Cognitive bias. I love it when you talk dirty.
Yeah. That one gets everyone going. So we do have this bias, this kind of tendency to take whatever it is that is the focus of our attention and project it onto the world around us. And it's not so much that it that is showing up statistically significantly, that there is more triathlon stuff in your world or whatever. It's more that we have a limited capacity to focus as human beings. We can only kind of look and listen to a couple of things at a time. And when something's really kind of eating you up from the inside, like some idea, something that you're working on, what happens is that you basically just sort information and don't pay attention to the other stuff so much. If I was to go to the same party as you and meet 25 people, the one person who introduced himself and was like, oh yeah, I did a triathlon last month, when I asked him what he was up to, I'd just kind of be like, oh yeah, whatever. Yep. And I'd probably, get really excited about whoever started talking about psychology or what, internet marketing or whatever. Whereas you would go away from that party and be like, oh, I can't believe I met another athlete, Yep.
Exactly.
So there's that difference, same party, but two totally different experiences of it, because you and I both have different projections for the world around us. And, bringing it back to pricing, the issue that we have is that, as you said, when a lot of entrepreneurs start out in business, they're not in the place where they have, where they've got the Amex sort of black card.
Exactly.
They don't have access to a huge amount of resources, and for that reason, it's very, very difficult for a lot of small business owners when they're starting out to understand not only that customers exist who do have that kind of spending power, but also that customers exist that who are happy to have that kind of spending power, who don't even sweat about it, who will put down $25,000 for a piece of jewelry that they don't even need, and think nothing of it. And it's really hard to get into that mindset when you're looking at paying for your first set of business cards and thinking, should I order 250 and kind of play it safe, or go for the 500 and really splurge?
So true. It's so absolutely true that when people start out. I remember when I first, that's a perfect example. I think I experienced almost that myself when I very first started out, and I don't have business cards anymore, but at the time I was like, you have to get business cards, and it's you're exactly right. So I guess the question from there is then, well, what can people start doing? How can they start breaking away that pattern and actually sort of start thinking and feeling confident to price their products what they're actually worth? Is there, what is that step that someone can go through to get towards that?
Right. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, and there's a whole bunch of them. So we'll just kind of dive in no particular order, I guess, and start talking about some of the strategies.
Cool.
I think that one of the really important ones is to start doing a lot of market research. And this sounds like a weird piece of advice from someone who's focused more on psychology, but I actually believe that if you kind of feed statistics into your brain, it can really do a lot to kind of correct your perception of reality. It's very easy if you live in a particular neighborhood where you're exposed to a certain demographic and you grew up perhaps in a certain financial or economic type of environment, it's very easy to allow that projection to really continue and to believe that that's really all there is to the world. And the bigger picture issue with that is that if you do kind of grow up in that space and surround yourself with people in that space, in that same kind of financial space as you, it also does a little bit to kind of rob your ambition. It's like if you try and succeed in life relative to the people that you went to high school with, what will happen is that one day you'll probably end up with a slightly nicer car than the other guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So that like, competitive focus is a very weird dynamic, which is why I always encourage my clients when they are playing with new business ideas to really cast the net wide with market research and look at what are people spending on products in this vertical, like or in this space. If you're thinking that you want to start a company that sells sports gear or whatever, like what are people spending in the ultra luxury end of the market? What are people spending in the budget end? And then what are people spending in both of those areas, like all around the world? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than just in the area that you're at, because you'll start to find out some really, really fascinating statistics. And part of that is really just having your mind blown up by those statistics. I think it's a really, really powerful an important thing to experience, to connect with financial data, hard facts that force you to open up your mind and allow into your perception this idea that there are people out there who are operating in the luxury, like high end, and are really comfortable with it. And I've got to say at this point in this talk that I have a tendency, I've got a bias of my own to really encourage people to try and get into that space, because I believe that the most, and there's certainly statistics to support this, that the most underutilized and under-marketed to group is the ultra-affluent in the world, that these are the people crying out for new products and services that really meet their needs and meet their demands. They're the people who have the most disposable income and who are always looking for the next best thing, something new to try. And I think that it's a really smart move as an entrepreneur to try, to position your services or your products to appeal to that demographic. It's where you can build an extremely profitable, high leverage business without having to really scale up and, become Walmart, right? Like if you're only making a couple of cents margin on every product that you sell, you really have to be selling to half the world to be making it worthwhile.
Sorry to cut you off there, but that's a very good point that I think is worth touching on, is that so many people confuse revenue with profit. And like I know I speak to a lot of people about this sort of stuff, and they're saying, well, look, I need to make some money now. Or, they start thinking that if, as long as there's money coming in the door, my business is being successful. But, if that business or that revenue isn't actually generating a profit for you, or is actually only making a couple of cents a transaction, is it even worth you doing that? You're just being busy for the sake of being busy. You're not actually making any money. Because a lot of people, I think, when you first talk to them about sort of, increasing their prices or just going for that luxury end of the market, they start to sort of think, well, hang on, I won't be able to make a sale for 2 months because they're harder people to sell to, and it takes a longer buying cycle, or whatever sort of excuse they come up with, and some of them may be justified. But at the end of the day, if you're keeping busy for 3 months and not actually making any money, there's revenue coming in the door, but it just goes straight back out because you're selling stuff at 1 cent margins like Walmart. What's the point of even doing that? You're just being busy for busy's sake. You're better off actually positioning yourself properly from day one into that luxury market. Does that sort of...
Yeah, I always like to use the like car dealership example. I love cars I love cars that go really fast, and it's a great industry in terms of there's a large spread from sort of budget through to luxury. So it's a good example. And I think as an entrepreneur, like if I was given the choice, like I have to start a car dealership, I would much rather sell five Ferraris in a year, or one, and walk away with like a significant profit. I don't know what kind of markup people make on a Ferrari, but you can guarantee that it's probably the equivalent of, the baseline salary in most first world countries.
Absolutely.
And I'd much rather do that than have to sell a Toyota every week just to be able to pay the rent. And point that's the really exciting thing about being in the luxury space that a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize, is that if you can overcome the fear and the psychological obstacles and then the strategic and tactical obstacles, which are just other business challenges, and we're going to talk about, if you can do that, like what lies on the other side is this phenomenal opportunity to build really highly profitable businesses, doing really fun stuff as well. It also has to be said, like, who do you think has the more fun? The person who designs the bodywork for the new Toyota Camry, or the latest V12 monster that Ferrari put out.
So how do you get over that sort of psychological thing? Because a lot of people, as you said and pointed out, is that that they're not willing to sort of take that jump or go that area for various reasons, and a lot of them, when you break it down, are just stories people are telling themselves. Like, what's the process there?
Yeah, so the first one, just to circle back, getting exposed to statistics is a really fun thing to do, because that I think that's the first step to opening up the mental doors of perception, so that you can really start to see what this market is. So, like, some of the things that I found out in my very kind of journey have been that one statistic is that there's 16,000 people in the US alone who have a net worth of $100 million or more, which is pretty phenomenal, right? So I can't quote exactly where that comes from. I don't have my notes in front of me, but it's there's a lot of stuff that Forbes put out about. Forbes do a lot of research about kind of high net worth, ultra affluent individuals, and one of the best sources for it is the private aviation industry, because that's people who fly Learjets around the world are obviously super wealthy, right? There's thousands of these flights every year all around the world. These flights are not kind of occasional once a month things. In total, there's thousands and thousands of flights everywhere in the world. Forbes put out some stats just about the US alone about private jet usage, and it's just phenomenal. And when you think about those people who are paying for that kind of travel, like, think about the mindset of that customer. And this is what I'm talking about having your mind blown by the statistics. Like, these are people who are going to pay a markup of about 25 times to fly private instead of business class, because business isn't good for them, or isn't convenient enough for them, or isn't luxury enough for them. And what I think that really says to an entrepreneur is that whatever you think, whatever your product or services that you're selling to the the mainstream public, you could probably be creating something 25 times more luxurious or high end and selling it for about that price. And that's the beginning of kind of of dealing with the mindset. So even if you can't, like, I don't like to tell people surround yourself with wealthy people necessarily, because that's not always possible. And I don't like to tell people, well, go and buy a Ferrari so you can know what it's like to be in the cycle of person. Yeah. For a sponsorship deal to start telling people to go and spend a lot of money on luxury stuff that they don't need. But I'm just kidding about that, by the way. Something to think about, surrounding yourself with a bit of that. And if you can't do that, exposing yourself to some of the statistics that are about that, which are really just a Google search away, to start looking at, well, where are people spending money in this space, like finding out that the ultra affluent demographics that Forbes put out, these people they publish every year a kind of a summary of where they're spending their money, and there's this whole segment of society that spends over $100,000 a year on liquor, for various reasons, parties and stuff, and all of this stuff is published. So actually, one of the great resources for that is a book by Dan Kennedy. I just realized I've been searching around on my computer to find some of these stats. He quotes a bunch of them. Is Guide to Marketing to the Affluent, which is something that I think it's a book that every entrepreneur should read, whether or not you love or hate Dan Kennedy's approach. Yeah,
the no BS guides, all his no BS guides are great, aren't they?
Though, quotes, like, he's really done a lot of research, and he kind of makes this case for entrepreneurs to get into that space. And it sort of blows your mind with some of these statistics about, like, just how much money some of these really, really wealthy people have to spend on this stuff. So, and I think it's important to look at that top sort of 1% of the market, and then also to know that you don't necessarily have to go all that way. You don't have to sell things to the people who buy limited edition Ferraris. You can target the Lexus demographic or the Mercedes demographic. Like, there's a lot of space in the top end of the market, and I guess the real point is that there isn't all that much space in the low end of the market.
Well, because it ends up being that race to the bottom. So, yeah, the one thing I guess that a lot of people, that I sort of speak to have this issue with, it's just like, okay, look, I sell I'm a retail bike store. You know, I'm a plumber. I'm just a Joe Blow selling, good quality services and products to average Joe Blows. And obviously to make that jump and transition the existing business from the sort of that, average, for want of a better term, sort of, price point business to luxury thing is quite a big jump. But, even just, increasing your prices by 10%, that's, without any additional cost of service or cost of delivery, that 10% extra is going to go straight to your bottom line in your hip pocket. For a lot of people, that's a huge difference to the actual profitability of a business. Because that's not going to affect any cost. That 10%, as I said, is just pure profit. But they still have this reluctance to even jack their prices up 10% because I think they're going to the price elasticity in their market, in their client base, is just so tight. But I think that's more of a psychological issue than an actual marketing statistical truth. In that the price elasticity, as Dan Kennedy talks about it quite a bit, 10% shouldn't actually affect your business too much if your marketing and your communication material, which you should already have at a very good level, is effective.
Right, precisely. Like there's definitely space to trial a really tiny increase, and probably nothing will happen. And so long as you're not marketing yourself as like a best price in town, if you find something better, we'll beat it kind of service. Like, so long as you're not in that game, then no one's really going to notice. And there's also so many ways to justify the price increase, not only in your mind, but in the minds, of even the most cynical customers. And I think it's really important to understand the mindset of the slightly more wealthy client or customer right through to the sort of ultra affluent customer, because you can start looking at, well, what do these people value? And one of the easiest and the first step, the easiest things in the first step to take, particularly for the businesses that you just mentioned as examples, like I think you said like a bike shop or a plumber, is customer service. Like if you take one book on kind of customer service strategy and you read it and you implement like 5 tactics that it gives you in your plumbing company or your bike shop, right? You're going to have a really powerful reason to increase price and have your customers not even care because you've created this far better experience for them. And that's how, like, when you look at the type of plumbers that the affluent of this are in homes and offices, it's people who offer it's plumbers who offer that superior customer service experience or that reliability. And that's actually one really important point, is that, and something that I think entrepreneurs really need to get, is that very, very affluent people who spend money on high-end products and services value time more than money, or in a significantly bigger way. Like their time is worth more to them than the average person.
Yeah.
And your product and services to support that, people save time, then you're going to be the go-to choice. And it's also a great, from a bigger perspective, it's a great thing for most entrepreneurs to get, because I think that as business owners, we should really be valuing our time and paying really close attention to, like, where are we spending our time in our business? So, if you can get it, then you'll be able to think just like like these customers. It's kind of one of those things that you really need to own and have at every level.
Yeah. Well, what about a product-based business? Because obviously, if you're a service-based sort of scenario, plumber's a perfect example. What about with product-based businesses? Something I talk about quite a bit is that, even if you are a retail store, selling, bicycle parts, or you're a furniture store or whatever it might be, there's still obviously a customer service component of the product. There's, at the end of the day, if you don't offer any sort of customer service or differentiate yourself like that, and all you do is just move commodities, then obviously it is potentially harder to actually increase your prices, because it's just, if you're selling a commodity, the same service and outcome you're going to get by buying from your furniture store compared to the 1-2 doors down the road is exactly the same, because you're going to walk out of the store with the same commodity. So what you have to do is end up wrapping around whatever product you do sell, if you're in that space, some sort of service, and end up turning your business into more than just a commodity distributor. What's your thoughts around that?
Right. This is where I want to share some of the slightly more advanced strategies that they're awesome. Simple, but really, really powerful, that I've seen a lot of my clients utilize to great effect. So one of the best ones, whenever there's a founding entrepreneur who's a bit of a personality in the business, and there's the opportunity, for an individual to do this, I always tell people, become an artist, build some artistry into your business and kind of get famous for that. Like, I think that every independent furniture store, since you're using that as an example, in the world should be building a blog about interior decorating and trying to create a presence, on the internet as the go-to authority on interior decoration, and talk, and posting and talking at length about like how to create phenomenal spaces with great materials and what to do. Like, basically becoming the hub authority, the big name in that space. Because what's going to happen then is that people are going to come into the store so that they can buy from the people who have great ideas. And it's going to become not about buying the commodity of a new couch. It's going to become about buying the couch that was recommended by the people who are known as these amazing sort of artists in that space.
I think that's a great way of putting it, because I kind of often term that market leadership, but by I guess changing the language a little bit to artistry, it does give it a much different sort of connotation, which is very cool.
Well, the reason I like to talk about artistry is that when we talk about fine art, you actually, like, it's a really interesting market to look at, the fine art world. I think it's fascinating from a business point of view, because it's something that's basically all style, no substance. I don't want to sound super cynical, but when there's people can splash canvas splash paint on a canvas, $150,000 for it, and then somebody else does the exact same thing, but no one will pay $25 for it. Like, what's going on? The answer is all marketing. That if you can position yourself as the authority in the space where every idea that you have is intrinsically valuable and recognized as like this expression of art, then you can splash canvas and charge a lot of money for it. And I think that, like, that's obviously really hard to sell paint on a canvas. It's very, very difficult. Not too many people succeed at it. But if you get at something tangible, like, selling couches and beds and chairs and stuff, then you've got a really great shot. So I always think that bringing some artistry into the business and really embodying like the psychology of an artist is really fantastic, because that's the one area of human endeavor where there's really no limit to the amount of money that you can ask for.
Yeah.
It's like it reminds me of the Four Seasons and Donald Trump have both launched, since we're talking about furniture, have both launched a range of beds.
Oh, wow.
I obviously know nothing about beds. Like, I don't to advise me on sort of lumbar support or anything like that, right?
Exactly.
But what would like a hotel really think about? Like, a hotel knows about making food and, like what they've made these beds and everyone buys them because they're kind of leaders in that space and there's that personality behind it, and you kind of get to say, hey, well, this is like a Donald Trump bed, so, I must be really cool. And that's exactly what I really fine art. If you have a Jackson Pollock hanging in your house, you can say, hey, like, do you know who painted this? And everyone goes, no. And then you get to tell them. And there's that narrative behind it as well,
It's the story. It all comes back to the story.
Right, exactly. Like, imagine if Lance Armstrong created a bike shop, since we're using that as an example, I mean, I'm sure he basically already does. There's probably a cycle that he rides that you can go out and buy that probably costs an awful lot of money because he rides, I don't know, you probably know more about the specifics.
Yeah, but there is, absolutely. Well, he actually does have a bike shop in I think it's Austin, Texas, actually, funnily enough, called Mellows. But yeah, and like, it's huge. People, all around the world, order in the cycling gear so they can appear like they've actually been to the store and bought some stuff from Lance Armstrong. But I think you had 2 points there, so I'm not quite sure if you had something else to say, but I also want to sort of take this to online marketing as well at some point and sort of have a conversation there too, if we can, at some point during the show.
Yeah, like about applying this to online marketing. Yeah. Well, let's sort of dive in. Like, I think that the whole artistry thing is really, you can absolutely do that online. I think that that the digital world is actually the most powerful medium for developing that type of brand, for building up that type of authority, and as you say, like, leadership. Really becoming this person in that space, because what all that type of stuff allows us to do is to basically create commentary around what you're doing. So I think that if you have a bike shop, then you want to build the blog that talked about the races that you were doing and had videos of what you get up up to on the equipment that you put together and blah, 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 and the weekends and things like that, creating this kind of narrative around it so that people are really going to know what you're talking about. And when they're going to come in, they're going to ask for the things that they saw on that website. And, that's what an artistry component works in. The online strategy is the other pricing strategy that I like to work with my clients on, which is simply become a pundit. If you can be a pundit, like an industry leader in terms of like a voice in the media in your space, it's not quite the same as being an artist, where I think I would define artistry by people are paying you to think in ways that they can't even imagine. If you hire to create a sculpture for you, you're basically saying, do this because I can't even imagine, I don't even know how to create a sculpture, so please make one for me. You know what I mean? Yep. So being a pundit is slightly different, because that's where that's when you're in a position like someone like Robert Scoble, who gets pulled into Rackspace, the technology business, because he's kind of guy has opinions about everything in the tech world. He was one of the first real bloggers to ever exist. And so when he aligns himself with a major brand, everyone's going to look at that brand and think, well, if he's into it, then we must be. It's kind of the power of sort of celebrity testimonial. Yeah. So if you're somebody on the internet, specifically the internet, who has a lot to say about everything. There's a great iOS developer, writes iPhone and iPad applications, whose name's Garrett Murray, and he's just this kind of random guy who started blogging a very, very long time ago about kind of everything in his life, right down to pictures of his cats, literally. Taking photos of his cats, and he has, I imagine, thousands and thousands of blog subscribers at this point. And when he launched his iOS development shop, he rapidly attracted clients like Condé Nast and a couple of really, really big corporations, and built got to work on these phenomenal projects. And he's just a single guy, like a freelance. I think he has one guy who's his business partner. There's a ton of business, and they've gotten to that point by basically being this authority in the media. He doesn't even talk about iOS development that much. He'll blog about the latest app gadget or his thoughts on whatever. So he's really acting like a journalist in some sense, being a pundit and just having an opinion about absolutely everything that happens in the world. And I think that's another example of leadership, and it's another reason that people are going to pay you higher prices than you would normally command. Yeah, they're going to trust you as like an expert. So if you're a voice in the competitive cycling industry, you might not be the best cyclist yourself, but if you're someone who provides commentary on what's going on in that scene and in those races, and you also happen to have a bike store, you can bet everything you like, you're going to be able to charge money for creating custom high-end racing cycles for people.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think, I guess one way that I can sort of I summarize what you're talking about is that, high prices are fundamentally a byproduct of good positioning and good marketing. They're not a thing by themselves. They're actually a byproduct. And I think a lot of people, from what I see anyway, they think of pricing as like a separate foundation of a business or the profit of a business, but really it's actually just a byproduct fundamentally of good positioning and good marketing.
And precisely. Think, and it's truer more than ever now with the internet, because what the internet and I guess global business really allows us to do is price in such a way that we don't have to appeal to the people who are in our local geographic area. Like, I'm from New Zealand, you're from Australia. We both grew up in essentially like the bottom of the world, right? Yeah. There's certainly little towns in New Zealand where if I went and opened a luxury high-end custom cycle store, where we were charging, I think, people spend like $10,000 on
easily.
They're crazy. So if I went and did that in some tiny little town in the mountains in New Zealand, before the internet, I would have gone out of business instantly, because no one in that town could have afforded the bike, because that's just not what that area is all about. But the internet really gives entrepreneurs no more excuses when it comes to pricing. Like, another story actually is the Best Made Axe company. I think they're now just called Best Made because they make a bunch of stuff. But they axes that were custom 1,000-time folded like steel in sort of Japanese samurai technique. That these were like hand forged hatchets chopping wood with sort of like polished hardwood handles. Like, I sound crazy person talking about this now, but out of 3 billion people on the internet, there was enough crazy people who were into chopping wood and axes that this became like $1 million business because they sold like the best axe in the world, and it was priced accordingly, like several $100s for an axe, and they only needed to sell a handful of them to make a bunch of money. You know, you only need to connect with the tiny handful of people in the world who, you know, when you have a truly global audience who are willing to pay that kind of a price for what you're doing, when you've got the internet. So that's what I mean. You know, there is really no excuse now. Like, there's no reason why you can't find the 5 people who are so into flying kites that they're willing to buy a $5,000 kite next month and sell one to them. You know?
Yeah, and there's definitely going to be a market out there. I reckon there would have been 15 people in the last 90 days who have bought $5,000 kites. Have to be. Oh
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's probably that. I have no. We're just making like random industries up.
If we start this if we start that website before the podcast goes live, do you think?
Yeah, right, exactly. Let's get the kite business. It's where the profit is.
That's it.
But yeah, like, this is the thing: is that it is a truly global world now, and you know, you have the ability to sell things to to people who live in some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the world who 10 years ago, you would never have been able to sell things to. And it's a really exciting opportunity for entrepreneurs, but to be able to do that, we have to overcome our psychological conditioning that says no one's going to buy this.
Well, what about this? If someone actually just heard that statement and their first reaction is, well, that means more competition.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that theoretically, one day the market could be totally oversaturated, but we're really, really far away from that, because the other thing that the internet has done is that it's allowed people who have really, really weird interests, like people who spend $5,000 on kites, it's allowed those people to connect for the first time, and for the industries that support those interests to really explode and flourish. So there's actually, I think at this stage, that there's actually far more growth in terms of the amount of opportunity out there than there are people starting up, competing businesses in these spaces. And the other thing is, the reason that we're having this conversation is that so many entrepreneurs don't get this. So many entrepreneurs build businesses that they try to sell, the cheapest product they can to people who are shopping on price. But there's actually a lot of space for people to get into areas where you're selling in the ultra premium space, and there isn't anyone competing because no one else has kind of got the courage to do it. And the other really major kind of tactical issue is that if you are doing something in the ultra luxury space, it's far easier to create differentiation in terms of what you're doing than when you're trying to sell something really, really cheap. Because if you have a physical product, if you're selling a widget, like, I don't know, say you're selling soccer balls, that's your business. You sell soccer balls, and you want to create the world's cheapest soccer ball that you can sell for like 50 cents or whatever. That's going to mean that you're going to strip away features, you're going to get rid of packaging, you're going to reduce it down to the simplest possible thing, right?
Yep.
A luxury soccer ball is going to come like a book and a DVD about how to use it, and really beautiful packaging, and you're probably going to buy a subscription to a fresh soccer ball every month so that you never have grass stains on your soccer ball ever again.
So that's important.
There's so many, when you watch them play the World Cup or whatever, every time they kick one off the sideline, they get a totally fresh one back. So there must be in that. But there's so many different opportunities to be completely different from your competition with all of those. That's the thing about being an artist, is that if you're creating, the most beautiful soccer balls, you're going to be painting them or designing them or whatever in a way that's completely different. And I think that fear of competition is actually way more dangerous when you're at the, you should be much more afraid of competition when you're at the very bottom end of the market. Because 9 times out of 10, if you're trying to really compete in the cheap space, Walmart or whatever local version of that, wherever you're living in the world, is probably just going to come and steamroll you into non-existence pretty soon.
Yeah, exactly right. There's lower barriers to entry at the bottom. That's what it comes down to. So you want to try, and as you grow, even if you're there right now and that's where you are, you need to start moving out of that to sort of move up that scale to get away from those sort of competitors and actually get into a position where there is more barriers to entry, which is obviously going to give you a bit more security on a number of levels.
Well, that's exactly the thing. Like, one of the reasons that, that no one is making, let's think of another stupid example here, like gold-plated soccer balls, kites, that wouldn't work at all. It's still kites, is that the barrier to entry is significant. For a small business to start up doing that, they're going to have to spend a lot of money on product development. And that's true of a lot of really luxury businesses. You know what I mean? If there's luxury, if your stuff is expensive, chances are that it's going to cost a bit to start that game. And that's why you can't do this overnight. But if you can slowly start working into that space, increasing your prices, developing more and more luxury high-end products, you actually leave competitors behind in terms of your research and development, because people couldn't just come overnight and copy what you're doing. You know what I mean? It's
absolutely.
Like people, companies that make really luxury watches, like there's this kind of trend at the moment to be making watches out of like zirconium and like all of these new elements and kind of blends of metals and things like that. And some little business can't come along and just compete with those guys overnight, because whatever they've spent to get to the point where they're selling watches, for $100,000 a pop, you can be sure that it's not the same as setting up your first WordPress blog and getting going, selling something on, an ebook on the internet. So the more established you get into a luxury space, the more protection you have, because you're kind of playing the game at this higher level. So it's a much safer place to be in terms of competition.
Absolutely. So I guess moving on, before we sort of wrap the show up, I want to talk about coaching for a moment as well, because that part of, I think, being successful in anything is obviously the coaching side of stuff. That soccer example, obviously, the best soccer players in the world have the coaches, and I think a lot of people have that good habit, particularly people listening to the show, because we produce a podcast every week. They're getting in that habit of consuming the correct information every week, which is a fantastic start. But what's your take on actually, being committed and actually continually taking action on a regular basis? What's your take on that as a psychologist?
Yeah, it's something that I'm really passionate about. I have very recently declared war on procrastination of all kinds. I think that it's a really, really important issue, that when we're talking about any of these journeys in business, whether it's like, pushing yourself into the luxury space or whatever you're trying to achieve, it's so important that you do consume that, the correct information, that you, I guess, immerse your mind in the right type of information that's going to be fueling you at both the conscious and unconscious levels. That's my first piece of advice on this. And this talk today was basically, going to statistics and just start pouring it into your brain. I think that things like this podcast are obviously really, really, really help, but there's something really magical that happens, and this is what I've built my whole career around, when entrepreneurs make the commitment to spend some time getting a perspective that's completely outside of themselves, kind of being able to have a mirror held up so that they can really take a look at what they're doing and where they're going with their career. So I built my business, the Shrink for Entrepreneurs brand, around providing that type of service. That's what I do. I hold space for people, and naturally, it's actually a luxury service. It's premium priced for entrepreneurs who have been playing the game for a little while and are enjoying some success and want to create wealth, freedom, and massive impact and take things to the next level. So I work with clients to hold that space for them and hold up that mirror and have them really get that perspective on where they're going and any blind spots and obstacles that are going to prevent them getting there. But every entrepreneur needs that type of input, and that's when it comes to my war on procrastination. That's my latest project and my real passion I've been working on for like the last 6 months has been this brilliant program that basically helps entrepreneurs conquer procrastination, kind of kill it dead once and for all. So, yes, the project is Commit Action. It's at commitaction.com. And it's exactly that. It pulls the trigger on procrastination. It's an accountability program for entrepreneurs that whatever your focus is in business is going to have you accelerate in that direction and start smashing things off of your to-do list by basically holding you accountable each week to achieving massive pieces of action and moving you forward. And this isn't some info product. It's it's actually a powered by human service where one of our commit action coaches is going to be calling you up every single week to make sure that you're achieving really big stuff. That's just a part of it. We also track, measure, and provide a software service where you can analyze and look at how much action you've achieved and have that kind of profile available to you and the public so that you can see what you're doing. It's a program built from the ground up, utilizing psychological principles that are tried and true to make sure that entrepreneurs are always operating at peak efficiency in terms of motivation and just ability to smash stuff off that to-do list. So,
and this is something that I want to mention as well, is that you and I have been working together for a while now in terms of I've been using your services as sort of a consultant, coach, psych, whatever sort of the term correctly used is. And the thing that I've kind of, always believed in and has spoken about regularly on the show here is that, people should have a coach of some level. And what I've kind of come to, I guess, realise or believe now is that, I think traditionally I've always sort of spoken about people needing a business consultant or a business coach to help them, achieve their goals. And I think that's absolutely still true. But I think for a lot of people, it's not needing someone to actually give them education. It's someone to actually keep them accountable. And that's where I think, personally, I've got a lot of value out of working with you, is that it hasn't necessarily been about you teaching me business or marketing strategies directly. Obviously, we've had some good discussion around that sort of stuff, and you've been a mirror for some thoughts and some conversation, but it's been more around making me think beyond the business and making me sort of accountable to stuff, as opposed to sort of being a marketing or business coach. And I think that's what I've found really enjoyable about working with someone who's not that traditional business coach. I think everyone needs that sort of, no matter where you are, needs that that carrot and stick kind of stuff thrown at them. And I think traditionally, if you look at sports stars, there's two reasons a team has a coach. One is to actually teach them skills and things like that. But the second thing is obviously to keep the team and the players accountable for their actions on and off the field. And particularly that's more so when you get to the professional level, when you look at the people who are earning millions of dollars a year being an athlete. Like, their skills are there. They know the mechanics of their job, be it marketing or kicking a football or playing basketball. But the coach is there from a psychological and accountability perspective. And I think that's where I've found huge value working with you. And I think a lot of people, that with the internet the way it is and podcasts like this, the education's there. People know enough. They've bought enough products. They've bought enough information courses. They've read enough books. They've watched enough YouTube videos. The education to actually implement the stuff they need to actually grow their business, increase their prices, and convert more sales is there. They know the education, but the reason that's holding them back is not the education. It's the action and commitment. And I think without that clear distinction, so many people keep chasing more education because they think that's it. Whereas what I've sort of discovered, I think over the last few months anyway, by talking to people and experiencing it myself, is that it's not about the education, it's about the actual implementation, and finding the right coach to make you implement is far more beneficial than having a coach that gives you more education.
Precisely. And that's, like the work that I do one-on-one with my clients is really about holding up the mirror and finding all of the really interesting stuff as a result of doing that. I commit action to achieve exactly what you're talking about. For entrepreneurs who know, and this is the way that we describe it at Commit Action, it's for entrepreneurs who know exactly what they should be doing. Like, there's no uncertainty around that they have a list as long as their leg of exactly what they should be doing from a tactical point of view. And Commit Action is the thing that makes them do it. And I think that people who get started in business and they read a lot and they learn a lot, which is great. Like, I never want to discourage someone from doing that. But I think we all hit a point where we know enough at least to get started taking action. But as you say, like, a lot of people's inclination is to just keep scrabbling around looking for more and more information. So that's really who Commit Action is for, is it's for that. I'm so excited about it. Like, this project means so much to me, because I think if we really rid entrepreneurs of procrastination, of this insidious form of procrastination, they're going to be able to do some really, really huge things. There's so many people out there who've started out in business and they do deep down know exactly what they need to be doing, what they should be doing in their business. They just need something that's going to make them do it and build a habit of committing to action, on a weekly basis, just incrementally growing and taking more and more action. And I think, like, you know, you certainly know this, that once you start doing that, once you start achieving that real world action, you start getting a whole new source of learning that's way podcasts and books and videos and anything you can imagine. You start learning from the school of life. You get real world feedback from the results your actions are creating in your business and in the world. And that information is just priceless.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we're sort of coming to time as we sort of try and keep each one of these episodes under an hour. And, you know, I know you and I talk regularly, and we could probably, you know, talk a whole lot more at some stage. We might even try and get you back on the show at some point. But, you know, beyond, you know, commitaction.com, which is the new service, which I highly recommend and you know, recommend everyone at least checking out and having a look at. Like, obviously you mentioned you've got the blog and stuff like that, which is where you really built the Shrink for Entrepreneurs brand. Do you want the website there is just your domain name is petershallard.com, isn't it?
Yeah, it's my name, Peter Shallard, which is SHALLARD.com, or you can just Google search Shrink for Entrepreneurs, and I'm number 1 through sort of 50.
That's the beautiful thing about creating a brand and creating a niche.
Right, so that's the place that I really built my career as it is today. Commit Action, brand spanking new project. Been up and running for a couple of weeks, tested it, brought in a bunch of users who are absolutely loving it. But petershallard.com is where my blog is. There's a whole bunch of resources from free ebooks to you know, a back catalog of blog posts going back years. There's all kinds of really great stuff there about business psychology, you know, where our thinking intersects with our business's bottom line. And yeah, right, that's my home on the internet for sure.
Beautiful, mate. Well, you know, thank you so much for your time today. It's been much appreciated, and thanks for sort of working with me too, mate. It's clearly been beneficial for me and our businesses. So, mate, I'll leave you there. I'll let you get back to the beautiful summer sunshine of Atlantic City and Jersey Shore, and we'll talk to you again on the show at some stage.
Yeah, so I'm going to go and have a drink, I think. Thanks so much for having me. Lots of fun.
Cheers, man.
Bye.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Gocher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at PreneurMedia.tv or drop them a line via PreneurCast@PreneurGroup.com.